We got to talk about the Lakers, man. So, Timberwolves, Lakers must win game 4 for Los Angeles, and they do something that we have never seen, at least in the tracking era, and yet they still fall short the attempt to try to tie this series up 2-2. Now they're down 1-3, which is all monumental for several different reasons, but the most obvious one is this is an organization, a team that many people assume was going to win this series simply based off of star power and what they were going to be able to do on the offensive side of the floor. When you have Luka Doncic joining the roster with LeBron James and an ascending Austin Reeves, it felt as if like the Lakers, despite the fact their record wasn't that of a team that could compete at a very high level alongside the Cavaliers, Boston Celtics, and OKC, and yet here we are, and it seems as if like the Timberwolves clearly have something completely different in mind, as the underdog Wolves have clearly shown that depth, continuity, and defense triumphs and overtakes any type of star power that you may have on your roster. And this is something that, quite frankly, we've seen from this Wolves team last year, something that if you've been watching them closely towards the tail end of the regular season this year, they've consistently displayed it, but the way in which we saw it unfold in game 4 is certainly something different and definitely says a lot, not only about Minnesota, but more importantly about the Los Angeles Lakers moving forward. And to be honest with you, it was pretty easy to be in denial heading into game 4 about what was happening in this series. Game 1, the Lakers end up losing to the Wolves in large part due to them overreacting to a lot of attacks and drives from both Julius Randle and Anthony Edwards, giving wide open looks to Jaden McDaniels and Naz Reid, as those two actually led the team in scoring and had big moments. The Lakers bounced back, win game 2 in a way in which, again, you can expect the offense of Minnesota continue to struggle a little bit if they weren't able to generate quality looks. Naz Reid and Jaden were nowhere near good as they were in game 1. And again, both Julius Randle and Anthony Edwards struggle to find their footing, especially down the stretch of games. Game 3, slightly different, but a lot of similar patterns, but I think it's very easy to chalk this loss up to the Lakers simply due to the fact that Luka was not healthy at all. There had been stories breaking before the game occurred as Luka went under the weather, was nowhere near 100% healthy, and you can clearly see it on the floor. The Wolves took advantage of that all game long, while the Lakers unfortunately didn't really have a response or any type of adjustments in their scheme. And headed into game 4, I could easily see why so many Laker fans were still somewhat delusional or blind to what was very obviously in front of us. One of the bigger takeaways in game 4 is the whole Rudy Gobert conundrum. Rudy, so far this series, in my opinion, just has not been good. I do believe he's held up really well in switches, and so I give him credit for that. But everything else, it's been piss poor. He's been bad on the boards. He's been a complete negative offensively, and because how bad he is on the offensive side of the floor, it just makes quite literally everything else that the Wolves attempt to do significantly more difficult, while not giving them any more extra attempts on the offensive glass. And you can certainly not only see this clearly, but it shows up in the numbers as well. When Rudy Gobert is on the floor, yes, they still win those minutes, but it's only by 4. But when he's off, they win by a substantial margin. And the two clear takeaways from all of this is that you can see in the numbers defensively, which is where Rudy Gobert's value really lies in. Even though, yes, they get worse, it's only by a slight margin, whereas offensively, they become significantly better. And again, all of that is on display, and it was very clearly seen in game 4 as well. The Wolves do a substantially better job offensively when Naz Reid and Julius Randle are on the floor in that front court, stretching out the floor offensively and becoming slightly bigger as well on the perimeter, because now you can run lineups with Jaden and Nikhil or Jaden and Dante around Anthony Edwards. And overall, because of what they're able to do on that side of the floor, it does stretch out the Lakers defense, so much so to where it not only is more difficult to close out on some of those shooters, but it makes it easier for both Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle to drive in the spots, post up where they need to, but more importantly, make proper reads. That's something that this team has struggled with all season long. Taking Rudy Gobert off the floor opens up the floor so much for them that now they can make the proper reads and proper passes, and I do believe that is a variable that I was not expecting. And in my predictions, that's the aspect of the game that I thought that this team was going to struggle with the most. Anthony Edwards has shown some growth and maturation in his passing and playmaking, but nowhere near enough to solidify this team as a fourth quarter juggernaut. And same can be said about Julius Randle really all throughout his career. But who would have known that taking Rudy Gobert off the floor not only would have given the proper floor spacing, but would have also provided us a level of playmaking and passing from both Ant and Julius that, again, again makes this offense teeter all-time great status. And we saw it all throughout Game 4. Rudy Gobert could not buy a basket when he was on the floor, and when he was off, it then forced the Lakers to play man-on-man coverage because, of course, you couldn't get away with a zone as often with a level of three-point shooting, which then allowed both Ant and Julius to get to their spots and make certain plays, regardless if it's making a basket under single coverage or being able to draw a double team and make the proper reads, which again resulted in really great offense. I don't think it's that much of a surprise to many people that this team improved significantly on the offensive side of the floor. Now, with that being said, offensively, I don't think no one is really taken aback by the fact that this team looks better offensively without Gobert. It's the defensive side of the floor that has taken a lot of people by surprise, and quite frankly, it has been really impressive while you've been able to play this level of defense without your defensive anchor being present on the floor. And the biggest reason why they've been able to pull this off is the level of switching that this team immediately goes into when Gobert's off the floor with both Naz Reid and Julius Randle, which is the second biggest takeaway in this series, and that is both Naz and Julius have been amazing in switches, and this has really taken away any advantage creation that is normally seen from players such as Luka Doncic and LeBron James, and it has been seen all series long. But again, in Game 4, perfect examples of this, especially in the second half. Luka trying to get Naz or Julius in action, and both of them constantly blitzing Luka, using also the out of bounds line as well as a half court line as second, third defenders in the action. And even when that didn't occur, both Naz and Julius have been able to hold their own in switches, being aggressive, bringing the physicality to both Luka and LeBron, so much so that multiple times it has continuously resulted in either turnovers or tough shots for both of the star players. This has resulted in Luka having 2 games where he's only recorded 1 assist, and LeBron's ability to get players open hasn't been there either, making it significantly more difficult for a player like a Reeves, a Rui, a DFS, a Gabe, or really anyone else on the floor to kind of get things going. And it definitely feels as if, like, as the series continues to progress, that it's just 2 to 3 players for the Lakers and everyone else against the Minnesota Timberwolves, because again, no one can really get involved as often as they should when it comes to the Lakers. And to further clarify and give a perfect example of where exactly I'm coming from, again, Game 4, in the third quarter, the Lakers decide to roll out their 5-man lineup that JJ clearly trusts the most in Luka, LeBron, Reeves, DFS, and Rui, and they decided to do a little bit different when it comes to the level of screen setting. Normally, they would come set the screen with Rui and get Rudy Gobert involved, but instead, they kept Rui in the corner, set screens with other players, and the advantage that they were able to create is the fact that Rudy wasn't able to come over and help as much, and so Rui Hachimura got loose and knocked down a bunch of threes. But again, immediately when they took Gobert off the floor, all of that advantage creation went out of the window, and all the other shots that could have been given to any of these players start to really slow down, and you just start to see a lot more Luka ball or Reeves and LeBron trying to create something for everyone else, but it just wasn't there. And I think probably the best example of this, even though he did make this shot, was a corner 3 from Rui. Naz Reid is doing a back pedal recovery, trying to still get off a contest. That level of athleticism and versatility just isn't there when it comes to Gobert, and that's never going to be on the floor at all when it comes to him throughout the rest of these playoffs. But it's something in which they were able to use their advantage due to the level of depth that they had on their roster. Another great example of this actually happened in Game 3 when Luka was not 100% healthy, again, a bit under the weather, and his inability to create an advantage really did hurt the Lakers offense all throughout that game. Easily the biggest takeaway that I think a lot of people are going to have when it comes to this series and was seen in Game 4 in the second half is from the Lakers and their inability to really get any type of production from anyone else on this team outside of 3 or 4 players. And it's the biggest reason why I think JJ Redick decided to go just 5 men throughout the totality of the second half, which is the first time we've ever seen that in a playoff game in the tracking era, which dates back to the 96-97 season. And it was something that worked in the third quarter. Again, you can kind of see it, fresher legs. They were going out there, knocking down their shots, being very active defensively, especially when Gobert was on the floor. It was much easier to kind of pull that off and get quality looks. The Lakers actually turned what was a semi-close game in the beginning of the third quarter to a 12-point lead towards the end of the third quarter. By far had their best quarter throughout the series. We all know that that just wasn't sustainable. While I was watching it live, I was quite literally saying, hey man, you're gonna have to make a substitution here because this isn't working. And even though I think a lot of people take away from this what they want to. I keep going back and watching the second half of this game and watching JJ Redick just not sub anyone in and keep coming to my mind like, bro, there's just no way that he could not trust anyone on that bench 2 to 3 to 4 minutes. And I'm not even talking about trying to give any production out of these players, any Jackson Hayes, any Gabe Vincent, any Vando, rather than just getting rest for any of the 5 players you played out there for 24 minutes straight. That to me is not only the biggest takeaway from game 4, but the biggest takeaway throughout the entire series. You're talking about a team, and again, the talking points coming out of this series, of course, the Lakers are going to win. They have Luka and LeBron. They have more star power. They have the better offense. They have the pieces to compete with anybody in the NBA simply based off of name value and star power. But that's not the NBA that we live in anymore. You have to have depth. You have to have chemistry. You have to have continuity. You have to have defense and versatility. And it doesn't even mean that you have to always rely on them every single game. You just need to have them at your disposal so you can try different things throughout the series. And that's something that the Lakers quite literally cannot do. You're talking about a team where you have the Timberwolves. Dante DiVincenzo was shooting poorly. Same with Nikhil. And I've been explaining this through the entire time. Bro, Rudy Gobert has been a non-factor for the most part throughout this series, and yet they can still find different answers because how deep the roster is. They can go out there and try Julius, go out there, have Jaden have big games, go out there and Nas not miss a shot in the fourth quarter, and the reason why they're able to pull this off is because of their depth. They have the pieces to go out there, so when someone else isn't producing at the level in which they normally do, it can still result in championship basketball. The Lakers lack that. The Lakers are just relying heavily on 2 to 3 players to produce for them and hopefully get open looks for everyone else all series long. And it's very difficult to do, especially when you're lacking in other aspects, such as having backline help and having a playable big, also going out there and just having any type of versatile defensive player outside of DFS who can be impactful on both sides of the ball. That's also things that are very concerning. But I still come away with the fact that JJ Redick deciding not to give any substitution is very telling, because we all know that the bench, it's not where it needs to be. We all know that Jackson Hayes, he's practically unplayable despite the fact that he should be able to play in a series that features both Luka and LeBron just as a lob threat. We all know that Vando ineptitude offensively. We all get those things, but there's just no way that I'm forced to believe that JJ Redick has not properly prepared anyone on that team to play 3 to 4 minutes in a closing quarter of basketball just to relieve some of the starters. I get it. The team doesn't have the adequate pieces. And I also know that a lot of those pieces were moved away when they traded for Luka. A lot of people keep talking about the 1-on-1. You traded Luka for AD, but we also gave up Max Christie in that transaction as well. So you gave up another rotational piece and more importantly, a defensive piece in that trade also. And many people who've been watching this channel, you know that is the reason why I've been very skeptical of what this team is going to look like heading into the playoffs. It's the reason why I said when they made the Luka trade that this is no longer a championship team, even though they exceeded my expectations heading into the playoffs, because they just lack the size, they lack the depth, they lack the ability of two-way play from a lot of supporting cast members. They lack those things. These are all things that are very important heading into the playoffs. But I didn't think that it's this bad, and I don't think that it's this bad, right? I don't think that it's so bad that JJ Redick is forced to only play 5 players for an entire half of basketball. I just refuse to believe it's that bad. If we're in a must-win situation, these are the 5 players that I am going to play, and I was unable to prepare anybody else on this team to give me 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. Again, not of high-level production, but just enough minutes so I can relieve some of these other players. And I think that is coaching malpractice. That is a massive problem from JJ Redick. But I give all the praise to him because that 5-man lineup certainly put them in a position to win this ball game. But we all sat there and watched a 12-point lead get cut to 10, get cut to 7, get cut to 5, get cut to 3. And just like that, the Timberwolves now have the lead, and now you're trying to figure out how do you respond? How do you combat any of this? And unfortunately, bro, the team just doesn't have the pieces in doing so, and it's very, very troublesome. And I know for a fact that many people are going to leave this game game with whatever narrative that they're willing to push out there, because that's what ends up happening when it comes to the Lakers, which I think is fair. I believe there's a lot of over-optimistic coverage when it comes to the Lakers, unfair and completely unbalanced, which in my humble opinion also completely disrespects all of the other competition out in the Western Conference. So I do believe that it is fair, and whatever narrative you want to push, you certainly got out of it. LeBron went scoreless in the fourth quarter. Luka has been a target of the Wolves offense all series long, and again, we saw it all throughout the second half. He turned the ball over several different times as well. Austin Reeves missed pivotal shots down the stretch, but at the end of the day, it's really hard for me to sit here and tell 5 players to go out there and play mistake-free basketball for 24 minutes straight. People still running this narrative about how the Lakers can still come back being down 1-3, which is another thing I saw all throughout the timeline. You gotta stop. You gotta stop. But with that being said, those are my thoughts. Please let me know yours in the comment section below. And until next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.